So today we are honored and excited to be joined by Dr. Pasi Sahlberg. Dr. Sahlberg is an educator and scholar from Finland, which is considered by many to have one of the best educational systems in the world. Pasi Sahlberg was formerly a leader in Finland's Ministry of Education, and currently he is a visiting professor at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. He studied educational systems and reforms around the world and is a best-selling author and international speaker who has worked in over 50 countries. His award-winning book is called Finnish Lessons: What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland? And that is the topic we're going to focus on today. Dr. Pasi Sahlberg, welcome to Flashpoints, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ken. This is my pleasure.
Great. So you have a long and distinguished resume, and I barely scratched the surface. Can you start by telling us what's most important to know about you and the work that you've been doing in education?
Well, I always want to introduce myself first and foremost as a teacher in this world. I have been working as a teacher in Finland for many years, and in a way I want to always keep in mind the perspective that teachers and those people who are working in the schools have when we speak about education reforms and policies. So that's one thing I would like people always to remember when they're having a conversation with me or read my works. And the other one is that I have really traveled around the world and tried to understand how education is done in different parts of the world, in different cultures, and that's why many of the things that I think and say also are kind of framed through this international perspective.
All right. Well, many people look to Finland as having one of the best educational systems in the world, and we also know that people have very different paradigms and values about what they think that means, what constitutes a quality education, and they use very different kinds of criteria for evaluating the success or failure of different educational systems. So a lot of what we've been talking about in this education series is that there is a dominant narrative in the United States right now that claims that the educational system is failing based on standardized test scores, and it advocates a corporate-driven education agenda that's backed by government policy and wealthy funders, which promotes standardized testing and curriculum, school privatization, a lot of blame on teachers and their unions for educational failure, merit pay, firing teachers who don't raise test scores, and other kinds of policies we've talked about here. And that's a very different paradigm from what I understand of what is advocated by both social justice educators in the U.S. as well as a fundamentally different approach than Finland is using. So let me just start by asking you, how does Finland define the purposes of education?
I think in Finland, first of all, let me say that there are very few people in Finland who would claim that Finland has the best education system in the world. I think this idea of being the best school system in the world has been created by the foreigners. So many people in my country feel quite uncomfortable actually when you say that the Finnish education system is the best in the world. And this leads to the second part of the answer is that I think that the overall purpose of schooling is twofold in Finland. It obviously has a very strong individual, like a personal enhancement function that we want every individual in Finland through education to realize themselves and improve themselves and learn things and skills that they need in their lives. But then equally important is this other dimension that is more like education servicing a public or common good in the society. And these both are very, very important. So we cannot have one without the other, and when I travel around the world, I can see more and more education systems where the purpose of schooling has become almost only focusing on the individual personal development, what people get through education for themselves so that they can employ themselves or study further. But in Finland we have kept for a long time, obviously being a fairly small society up in the northern part of Europe, the purpose of using education for public common good as an extremely important part of the whole agenda.
Can you say a little more about what that means in Finland in terms of what would an education that is serving the public good be accomplishing?
Well, I think the first thing is that we provide education for free for everybody who lives in Finland, not only Finnish citizens, but anybody who is living in Finland gets education free of charge from very early years after birth all the way until the higher education and adult learning. Actually, the constitution in Finland says that education is public, and that indicates that it's seen as that education has a very strong kind of a social justice and common public good function in the society. So we want to include everybody into the school system. The other one is if we look at the higher education in Finland, that many people often find it surprising that a nation can provide free of charge higher education, university education to all citizens. We are reserving study places to about 65% of the age cohort in Finland in higher education institutions, and this is all for free. So higher education, for example, in Finland has a different purpose than in many other countries where higher education is more meant for the kind of a minor part of the society and for the elite, if you wish, whereas the other part of the population then needs to look for other opportunities to be successful. So education in Finland is a fairly inclusive, it's a publicly funded public service for everybody, where having private schools or option for parents to choose private education doesn't exist because it's illegal against the current legislation.
Okay. So in addition to education being free and publicly funded and a public service, what are some of the other key features and principles of the educational system, and how does that compare to some of the dominant narratives right now about how to improve education in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, one difference that I find, or maybe one characteristics that Finland has throughout the education system is that we have fairly strong and systematic focus on whole child or whole person development throughout the education system, and this is obviously linked also closely to the other of the purposes that education has, this common public good function. This means that we are not giving any priorities in our school system or education system to any particular subjects, as it seems to be in many other countries where the not only quality of schools or education, but also the performance and effectiveness of teachers is measured by focusing on a small number of subjects. We value the kind of a holistic development of people, whether it's arts or music or math or science. They're all equally important, making sure that also this kind of a broader focus on child or student human development will mean that the kind of a definition for being successful in education is much broader than, for example, here in the United States, where success in education often means to be good in small number of academic subjects. But we are not approaching teaching and learning in our schools at all like that.
Thank you for that. To what extent is there standardized curriculum and standardized testing in Finland?
Well, we have we have a national framework curriculum that is a national kind of a standard document that is serving for each and every school in Finland, that are the actual points where the standards and curriculum is designed. So we have a sort of a standardized document for every school and every district in Finland, but it's a fairly broad and general in terms of, for example, content and syllabus. What the schools and teachers need to teach, that's all decided at the local level and in most cases at the level of the school. So in that sense, we do not have a standardized curriculum for schools, because the curricula is always decided by the schools. When it comes to standardized assessments, we we do not employ any standardized assessments that would be externally employed to the schools before the very end of the high school. So we only have this one external standardized examination for the students who are graduating from high school, normally about the age of 18 or 19 years old. All the other assessments are done either by teachers or schools locally, or then by the system, the national authorities, when they collect the data through sample-based, no-stake or very low-stake assessments and tests. The difference, again, with this Finnish way of looking at or employing the assessment and data collection in our school system is that when we have this one external standardized examination at the end of high school, it's a very high-stake examination for the students who are graduating, because it will determine their next step in a higher education. But it doesn't have that high stakes for individual teachers or schools who are teaching where students are graduating, which is again a kind of an opposite to what it is in many other countries right now, where there's a lot of standardized examinations and tests that have no stakes for students but very high stakes for teachers and schools, because they have consequences through the accountability systems currently.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about the approach here? What are some strengths or problems of this approach?
Here in the United States?
Yes.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that the whole system is relying too much on these external high-stakes assessments. I hear when I travel around the United States that I do a lot currently, I hear many teachers and school principals and authorities mentioning that they spend up to 1/3 of the school year for standardized testing or assessment-related things every year, and it just doesn't make any sense to take 1/3 of the effective teaching and learning time away from children and students and spend it on all sorts of things that have very little to do with learning and understanding the things. So I think that the main problem here is that the whole system in the United States, in most parts in this country, is too much relying on these assessments, and there's too much time and also too much money and resources, billions of dollars every year goes just to administrate and run these tests, and for me it's something that's very difficult to understand as somebody coming from such a different, almost the opposite culture of teaching and learning, like Finland, for example.
Sure, and actually most educators you would talk to here would agree with you. I think a lot of these tests are being externally imposed.
Yeah.
You said that when the student is getting ready to graduate, they take that one high-stakes test. What happens if they don't perform well? Do they still have an option for higher education, or what happens at that point?
Well, we have, this final examination at the end of the high school in Finland is like the whole high school structure is very personalized. So it doesn't mean that the students have to sit the same exam exactly the same time. The whole high school and then the final examination is designed so that it will fit very well to the personal individual needs of students. So if we have a student who needs a little bit more time to, learn for the exam or, develop their skills, for example, in English or mathematics, they can take the exam when they feel that they are ready. And this system, we have had this system now for the last 20 years, and it has reduced the number of those students who failed because they failed this one-time exam. But we still have the whole final examination at the end of the high school is it's graded using the kind of a normal distribution, which means that there are always few percentages of those who will not pass the examination. What they can do is these students, they can sit once again, so they can try once again this one exam, not the whole examination, but one exam, for example, mathematics. But if they do not, if they fail twice, then they have to do the whole examination again. And if they still don't succeed with this subject or all these other subjects, then they simply do not have this matriculation final examination that is a necessary license for academic research universities. So we every year we have a few percentages of a few percent of the entire the cohort that is sitting the examination. Those who fail, they don't pass the examination, and then they are not simply considered as mature enough in these subjects, and they have to find something else to do. Some of them may go to study in vocational schools or adult education institutions or something like this. But the number of those students who in the end do not graduate and matriculate in this final examination is fairly small. I think we speak about 1 or 2% of students.
Wow, that's impressive. So I appreciated what you said earlier, that Finns do not necessarily consider themselves the best system in the world. I am still interested in what the results of Finland's approach to education is, however it is that you may measure that, and what some of the evidence is that would support the view that not necessarily the best, but that Finland has a successful and equitable educational system. So what evidence do you use to evaluate that?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say a word about this. What I mean by that, the Finns don't consider themselves to be the best in the world. When the OECD, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, for the first time published the so-called PISA results. That is often kind of the driver of all this conversation globally, internationally, about who is the best and how the others rank. These results were released in December 2001, and it really created a huge surprise around the world, mostly because there were several countries that were hoping or thinking of being among the highest performing or the best performing education systems in this first PISA study, but they were not. Countries like Germany, England, Sweden, Norway, even the United States, they were not anywhere near the top. But then the other part of the surprise was that Finland was there. Finland was actually the leader in the first 3 OECD studies between 2000 and 2006, and that was it was a surprise, a huge surprise to Finns, because we never had an aim or intention to be high in these international league tables, because we had an education policy and kind of a philosophy for a long time, since early 1970s, that we want to have an education system, school system, that is serving everybody well, that is providing every single child, wherever they live or whatever type of family they come from in the country, a good school and good teacher and good classroom to learn. So that's why all the way until these first PISA results were published, the main concern in evaluating or assessing the quality of the education system was more of the equity and equality, how equitable the system is in terms of helping everybody, all the children, to be successful and learn and graduate and all these things. So we never thought about education as a kind of an international global competition, but the education was seen through national education policies also much more about the kind of a social equalizing function in a society, where particularly those children and those pupils who come from more disadvantaged neighborhoods or areas or families would have access to good education and find their way forward. So we were basically measuring the quality of our education system, and we still are doing that in terms of how equal opportunities are taking place, how successful the system is in that, how big or small are the differences in terms of the educational performance between one school and the other or different parts of the country. So we had never been really obsessed and focusing so much on the actual academic achievement results at all in Finland, but we have been more concerned about building a system that is equitable and equal for everybody. And that's why when the PISA came, it's for the first time it showed that that by investing systematically on equity in education and equality and equal educational opportunities had actually paid off also through the excellence and quality of educational outcomes. And this, we didn't know that before the OECD's PISA study came along, and nobody actually knew that there is a kind of a very strong correlation between the quality of outcomes and also between the equity of outcomes. And that's one of these important lessons that Finland has actually been sharing now with the rest of the world, that the quality and excellence in most cases within the OECD countries comes with the strong focus on equity.
Wow, that is so important. That's a message we would just love to have every single person in this country hear and understand. I mean, I love the concept that the quality of education is based on the success in achieving educational equity, and that actually those things aren't in contradiction. There's actually a correlation between them. What did the results, either PISA or other results, say about the degree of educational equity? Like, who actually is benefiting from the Finnish educational system, who maybe is not? We know more about the results on the achievement side overall, but maybe not so much about the equity results.
Yeah, it's unfortunate actually that the people are focusing almost only in the quality and excellent side of these international results from the PISA study and others, and this is exactly the same thing here in the United States and any other country. And this is partly because of media. Media finds it easier to create these league tables where the highest scoring countries are in the top, and then come the rest. But so, as you said, that one of the aspects of these results is the equity, kind of a comparisons of educational equity in across the countries. And another interesting notion is that it's not only Finland. People often mistakenly think that Finland is a kind of a strange outlier in this world of education, that it has somehow been able to create a school system where high academic test results are there in math and reading and science, and then the system is also more equitable than the others. But it's actually, as the OECD is concluding right now, is that all of these high-performing education systems, if you look at Japan or South Korea, or look at Canada, many of the Canadian provinces, Estonia, the small southern neighbor of Finland, and Finland, or the Netherlands, they all have both of these things simultaneously, the high, very strong equity and strong focus on equity and equality and high equality. So I always want to emphasize this, that if you don't like to be compared to Finland only, then you can find many other countries. Actually, all of those high-performing education systems share the same thing, that they combine equity with quality, and that's again a great lesson for the United States also, where both equity and the quality in these international comparisons are not doing very well. So the lesson for the United States would be that it's not enough here to just think about how to enhance excellence in the system, how to raise standards and bring more technology in the classrooms and have more assessments, more data about the students' performance. The particular challenge here in the United States, based on these international lessons from Finland and other countries, is that what does it mean here in America to make the entire school system at the level of states and districts more equitable and fair for all the students. And one of the things that Finland has been doing already for the last 40 years is that we have embedded and integrated many of these social services and healthcare services in each and every school in Finland, to make sure that every child will have access to all these well-being and health and dental and mental services and care within their own schools, rather than being sent to be helped somewhere else. And that's something that I think the United States should be much more mindful about, that the hungry children will not be good learners, or unhealthy kids will find it difficult to be successful in learning. And if somebody cannot see or have aching teeth, that's something that should be cared first before we are expecting that these kids can perform and learn like everybody else. So this is a kind of a lesson that Finland and all these other successful countries have been doing, not only during the past couple of years, but during the course of the 3 or 4 decades.
That's great. I actually want to go deeper into this question. Let me ask you first, what would you say to those who claim that there is no real valid comparison between Finland and the U.S. because Finland is more homogeneous population and the U.S. has a lot more cultural or linguistic diversity or special needs, or, you hear that argument sometimes?
Sure. Well, my reaction often is that, of course, we are different. But then I also say that for me there is not a American education system. That education here is delegated. It's a right and responsibility of each of the 50 states. And more than half of the states here in the United States are about the size of Finland or smaller. So if the size is the issue, this argument doesn't take us too far. But then obviously we can argue about the lack of diversity and other things in Finland. That's true also, that you cannot. Many of the states here in the United States are very different if we compare this with the demographics or other things. But I think all these things, I said, sure, these are fine, but then there are many other places that are like, for example, some of the Canadian provinces or Canada as a whole is very much looks like the United States in many ways of the people. But I think the real difference is I often try to take this conversation to the like a real differences that we have between our countries that make us much more different than the size of or the nature of the people or the languages that we speak. And one of them is the how the wealth of the nation is divided among the people. And we are, Finland and the United States, we are equally wealthy nations in the world, so we have the same amount of wealth per capita between these two countries. But what is the difference is that this wealth that we both have is so differently distributed among the people. And you have, for example, in the United States, there are 23, almost one third of the, one fourth of the American kids in the school system come from the poor homes. So they live in a poverty. In Finland, we have about 4% of kids who come from poor homes, and this, I think, is much more significant difference that makes it kind of difficult to compare Finland and the United States. That we have so much different way of, taking care of our own people and make sure that they will have at least a kind of a fair starting point in education. And this said, I think there's very little I can do to make Finland much larger or make United States much smaller, but there are many things that we can do to make America more equal in terms of the income distribution, for example, when many of the learning outcomes or achievement gap issues or many others that are kind of a chronic things here in the United States would be very much more easier to work out. So obviously we are different, but the main differences in between Finland and the United States are not the size of the country or how many people live there or how many races or different demographics we have here. They are much more kind of a significant things. And the other difference is that we in Finland and the whole Scandinavia, Nordic countries, we really give all women a kind of an equal voice in the politics and in our societies at the large as well. Here in the United States, the women's voice is fairly much muted in politics and also in the corporate boards, which is not the case back home where I come from. And these all play a very, very significant role in, getting through public or social policies regarding education and health and other issues, children, mothers and families, that we have been able to do in Finland and our Nordic countries during the last 30 or 40 years already.
Very well said. Thank you for that. So how does Finland actually support students who are coming in with different cultural, linguistic, or learning needs. As you know, here there's a lot of conversation about culturally relevant pedagogy. There's a lot of discussion about educating students who are not native English speakers. So how does Finland address the diversity of student cultural and language and learning needs?
Well, obviously the situation is that when somebody is moving from another country to live in Finland, these people never speak Finnish because Finnish language is only spoken by about 5 million people, and they all live in Finland. So that is a particular challenge for our education system, that practically all of those children who move with their families, and we have a lot of immigrants coming, much more than we have ever had before, moving to live in and work in Finland. They face this challenge of learning Finnish language so that they can be integrated in the normal schools. So normally every school has a system where they allow children to study using their own mother tongue, normally during the first school year when they are in a country. So it means that the school or the district education authorities, they have to find people who are able to work with these kids in their own mother tongue. So we may have schools in Helsinki where 25 or 35 different languages are spoken, and they have to find these people to work with these children. At the same time, these non-Finnish born children in the school, they attend intensive Finnish language classes so that they learn the basic things, and many of these kids, they learn during the first 6 months or so. They learn enough Finnish so that they can be integrated into the normal mainstream classroom, and there's always somebody there. In most cases, there's another assistant teacher or somebody who is speaking the native language with the child in the beginning, so that they can get a kind of a smooth and safe and comfortable integration into the normal class. I think the main difference really between Finland and the United States in terms of integrating these newcomers into the normal school system is that the Finnish school system in most parts is designed in a very individualistic way. It's much more individualistic school system than here in the United States, meaning that, for example, we are not expecting that students would be compared, their performance or learning would be compared to the grade average or some type of proficiency expectation. That is a very common thing here in the United States. You hear people saying that, asking questions like how many pupils are reading at the grade level. We do not have this grade level reference when we are thinking about the individual students' learning. It's always every learner's performance or progress is compared to his or her own potential. So it creates a completely different environment, and the absence of these standardized assessments that puts all these children here in the United States and other countries to the same line that they have to perform against the kind of a statistical average. We never do that.
Here, what happens in addition to the standardized testing is you group students by grade levels based on age, and then you're delivering a curriculum where everyone is expected to more or less learn at the same pace, and you're testing them at the end of the unit and sorting them into winners and losers. So I'm hearing what you're saying is it's much more differentiated by where the student is at. How do you actually group the students? Are there grade levels based on their proficiency level, or are students still grouped by age and you differentiate within a classroom based on where they are? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, well, in the K-9 school system, that is our compulsory school system, there in most schools, children are studying in age-based classes. But the schools cannot. It's actually against the regulations and law to group the students based on their performance or progress. So the school cannot, regroup the students so that they would have the more advanced kids in one group and then the others in other groups. it's quite the opposite. That the responsibility of the school principal in Finland is to make sure that every classroom in that school is socially mixed, and that the children must study in a socially diverse classrooms. For example, regarding the immigrant children, so that they will be distributed across the different student groups and classes, rather than kept in one and the same classroom. But this individual approach really redefines the whole idea of what it is to be a successful student, because you can be successful in a Finnish system, a successful student or individual by beating your own odds where you come from. It doesn't mean that you need to have a grade A or B or something like this to be successful. You can succeed in school if you do better than you would actually do given all your conditions and circumstances where you come from. And this is creating a completely different definition, of course, for the failure as well, because we really have a failing student is somebody who is not doing or performing to the level that he or she could or should do, given all the conditions and potential that this individual has.
Right. So it sounds like it's more about helping the individual student gain mastery over the material in their own pace, as opposed to how does the student compare to another student of the same age at a particular moment in time.
Yeah.
So what happens if a student is significantly behind academically? How is that student supported?
Yeah, well, Finland has the system of special needs education, just like the United States has, but we have a very different criteria and kind of a system of screening and helping the students. If there is an individual who is about to be left behind academically in a classroom, these individuals often will receive a special kind of intensified help and support from a specialist or expert in the school. The difference again between the special education system in Finland and here in the United States is that we have many more. We have about 3 times more students overall within our education system who are receiving some kind of special needs help or support compared to here in the United States. And the other one is that the system in Finland is designed in a way that the school can begin to provide help to, for example, this type of individual student that you asked on a day one immediately. Whereas here in the United States, at least many parts of the country, there's all sorts of paperwork and bureaucracy, and wait time can often exceed several months before the school can start to do anything at all with these students who obviously are getting deeper and deeper into problems that can be many kinds in terms of their learning and performance in the school. So the Finnish system is more sensitive in terms of identifying the learning difficulties and special needs, and it's also much more faster in terms of reacting to these difficulties. I'm often saying here that the Finnish system is trying to prevent and investing more in the prevention of problems rather than repair. And we know in life that prevention in most cases is much cheaper and more effective than repairing the problems and difficulties that have already occurred.
Absolutely. Now, what a lot of people in this country will cite is a big problem that gets in the way of learning is disruptive behavior problems in the classroom. That's something you'll hear a lot. To what extent are some of those things headed off by the type of educational approach you have, and then what is actually done when you have a student who's chronically disruptive?
Well, I think that the first thing that the Finnish schools are doing is this very early intervention into with these individuals that may have behavioral issues. And in many cases, I must say that these things can be prevented rather than let these problems and difficulties accumulate, and then the school intervenes when this, in many cases, it's too late already. But we cannot prevent and help all of these cases. But the special education and the student welfare system within every school is able to intensify this help and support, and in the extreme cases to provide even individual counseling and support for those students who cannot cope with themselves or in a normal classroom. So I think that we really have a system in Finland that is prepared to help all kinds of cases, but this is not to say that each and every problem could be helped like this. But I think that this flexibility and kind of an early intervention strategy that the Finnish system has been designed upon has been able to and is able to cope with many of these things early on.
All right. Can you just say a word about homework? I think a lot of our listeners might be surprised about the difference in approach.
Sure. Well, I often hear here in the United States, this is again maybe because of some inappropriate media coverage about the Finnish school, that they say that Finland there's no homework at all, and kids basically just go to school and they're very smart with the things that they get in the school. Of course, we have a homework, and this varies between one school to another quite a bit. But the common philosophy in Finland is that we do not believe that doing more homework would be necessarily beneficial for children, individual children, for their learning. So most Finnish schools are fairly mindful with the amount of homework they assign for children. I know many of the primary schools in the early elementary years that they try to avoid giving any homework at all, so that the kids could have time for themselves when they come home from school. And in these cases, often these schools are making time available during the school day, during the lunch break or recess breaks that every school must have in Finland, so that the kids can do, if they have some homework, that they can do the homework before they go home. But obviously, if you look at the high school students, when they are in Finland 16, 17, 18, they study in high school, the homework load can be fairly heavy for many students, but that's a different part of the school system. But the K-9, this compulsory education, has a fairly low load of homework. The ninth graders, for example, in Finland often say, when foreigners ask them how much they spend time with homework every day, the common answer is about 30 minutes, half an hour, 20 minutes, or something like this. So it's never in hours in Finland.
Okay. I want to switch directions a little bit here and ask about teachers and administrators, how they're treated in Finland and how that differs from the U.S. A lot of the narrative right now about the problems in education in the U.S. is firmly blaming teachers and blaming the unions that allegedly protect bad teachers. So how is the teaching profession viewed in Finland?
Well, teaching profession is viewed as any other high profession in Finland. We often hear, including in my own country, that teacher is seen as the same level of social status in our society than lawyers have, or medical doctors, or architects, or engineers. In other words, anybody who has has to have advanced academic degree and qualification before you can teach. The other interesting indicator of this, how Finnish people see the role of the teacher or the place of the teacher in the society, is that there was a survey a few years ago that asked that if Finnish adults, if they were about to get married again, what would be the ideal profession for this imaginary spouse, and the teacher was very high. I think it was number one among Finnish men, and it was number two profession among Finnish women, just after medical doctor, that they were hoping to have for their spouse, which indicates that somehow Finnish people see teachers not only as high professionals, but also that they have a very positive image in a society as a people the qualities often associated to teachers in Finland is that they are, in general, that they are good people. They know how to get along with other people. They can organize things. They can take care of children and many other kind of qualities of good life that people would often think about. And that's why I think that the teacher in Finland is still held in a very high prestige in our country.
And what kind of training or support or collaboration is available to teachers?
Well, all teachers in Finland must have an advanced academic degree, meaning the master's degree if they're primary school teachers, they need to have master's degree in education. It's a very different system than here in the United States. In Finland, primary school teachers, they have to study educational sciences for 5 or 6 years to earn their master's degrees. And then if you teach subjects, like I was a math and physics teacher, I did my master's degree first in a university in math and science, and then studied education and the teaching diploma for another year. So all the teachers, anybody who calls him or herself a teacher in Finland, must have at least master's degree, which is a kind of a rare thing in the world.
And what about once you are a teacher? How collaborative is the profession? What happens when a teacher struggles? Is there a more collaborative or more punitive solution?
Yeah, teaching in Finland is really a team sport, and which means that when you work in a school, you never use the wordings like these are my students. It's always that the teachers see the students and children in the school as they're kind of a common children or common students. All the school policies, if you're a school principal, by the way, we don't call them administrators like here in the United States. I think you should also call school principals a principal, not the administrator, because they should be, or head teachers who are leading the schools, and all the head teachers in Finland nowadays, they really try to help the teacher community and faculty to work as a team. One teacher helping the other one if they need help, and that's why the first reaction in Finnish schools in most cases, if there is a teacher who is not able to perform according to the expectation, is to ask, how can I help? What can we do to help you to get over this or improve, rather than think about the sanctions or the ways we can get rid of this individual, which is has been a surprising and striking thing for me here in the United States, that how easily people try to get rid of those teachers who are not able to do what they were supposed to do. But I think that in general, the teaching profession in Finland is much more based on collaborative, collegial profession and work than it is here and in many other places. And this may be partly because of the absence of, again, these standardized tests and data that make it possible to compare the performance and effectiveness of teachers.
Mm-hmm. And how are teachers compensated?
Teachers earn in Finland fairly close to the national average earnings. The monthly wage at the moment among all the teachers is about 3,200 euros. That would be like $4,000 a month before taxes, and it's a fairly close to what the anybody else with a similar degree in the public sector would make.
Okay. And what is the role of unions for both teachers and principals?
Well, we have in Finland only has one trade union for education, where practically all the teachers belong to their members. About 95 or 96% of Finnish teachers are members of this trade union, but also the school principals belong to the same union, and interestingly, also many of the school superintendents in our districts are members of the same union. Here in the United States, I often say that this Finnish union is not actually a trade union in a sense that the AFT or NEA here in the United States are. That the Finnish Trade Union of Education is more like a professional association that is having several other functions than just protecting the teachers' employment rights. It's a little bit like many of the Canadian, the Alberta Teachers Association, for example, is very close to what the Finnish this Trade Union of Education is. But it's very widely represented by all the educators in Finland.
All right. I want to go back to make another little turn here and take a look at the role of the state versus the private sector. You were addressing this somewhat at the beginning of our conversation, where you said that school is really looked at as free and a public good. And now we see in the United States where increasingly the private sector is coming in many cases, and able to make a profit from setting up schools, running schools, and all sorts of different ways that profit is woven in by the private ownership. So I'm just wondering about what that's like in Finland, what the role of the private sector is, market-driven approaches. Can you comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, education is, as I said earlier, the education is public in Finland. This is what the constitution stipulates, and it means that the education has to be provided free of charge, and one cannot really establish a private school or private university in Finland because it's not legal to charge tuition fees for any education that leads to qualification or degree in my country. So that's why we simply do not have private schools. We have some independent schools that are close to what your public charter schools are here in the United States, but there's just a handful of them. They're typically religious or language schools, or schools that are built on Waldorf pedagogy or something like that. But the opening a charter school or getting a charter from the government to run the school in Finland is a very, very difficult thing to do. I think we are very strongly against the idea in my country in general that anybody could or should be given a license to operate a school and take the public money and then make profit out of that, as is the case, has been in Sweden, for example, or many of the charter systems here in the United States are operating in a way where the private profit could be made out of the public money. We simply don't think that this is the right thing to do.
All right. We've talked a lot about the critique of the dominant educational narrative in the U.S. relative to the approach in Finland. What have you actually seen since you've been here that makes you hopeful? I mean, there are a lot of educators who are pursuing a more social justice paradigm. What have you seen that has been hopeful or inspiring among educators here?
Yeah, well, the hope in the United States is primarily, as I see it, with the fact that the success of Finland as a public school system, and similarly the success of places like Singapore and Japan and South Korea, and even most parts of Canada as some of the most successful education systems in the world, they have been made possible by employing and making a good use of American innovations. There are very few Finnish innovation, Finnish pedagogical or leadership or school improvement, kind of a technical innovations and ideas within education that would have been driving this continuous progress. These are all American ideas, and I have been speaking about that and writing about that recently, that how the American educational innovations and ideas have made all these successful education systems bloom, but at the same time you cannot see these innovations in a system-wide way here, practiced and employed here in the United States. So the hope is there that all the ideas, those ideas that have made Finland great or Canada great, can also make America, change this thing here. But the challenge is not the hope. I don't see too much hope here in the United States by just innovating and inventing again and again new ideas that I hear in many places. For example, much of this charter school discourse here in the United States has been that you need charter schools so that they can innovate more. I don't think that the charter schools or anything needs to be done here to innovate, find yet another innovation. I think the challenge is to look back at the moment for a while and try to see that what are those great American educational ideas that has been proven to be successful and good in other systems, and then start to employ and make a better use out of those things. The other one is obviously that you have all the resources that it takes to make American school system great. You don't need to go and borrow money or increase the budgets. You are already spending money here more than you actually need to make things great. Thirdly, you have all this know-how in how to build successful systems. Many of my friends here in America, they do most of their work outside of the country, in other countries, in Europe and India and China and Southeast Asia, to make their knowledge and wisdom available there in the countries, how to change the education system, how to bring the kind of a sustained improvement, because they cannot find room to work here or use their own knowledge and understanding here in the United States. So I see a lot of kind of sources of hope and items of hope in this country, because it could be much more difficult. If you think about Finland 40 years ago, or if you think about Japan or South Korea 30 years ago, they had to bring everything, all of these things, including the resources from somewhere, to become what these countries are right now. So that's why I think there are a lot of optimism that I can see. But then again, when you take a kind of a closer look at the political discourse and how difficult it is in this country to build a consensus or agreement on almost anything in life, or left alone education, that's where part of this hope disappears. That somehow I think the wisdom should be found somewhere where the America would come together and say that this is really what we need. If we are serious about educating everybody, if we are serious about social justice, if we really want to follow what the other countries have done with the equity and equality, and if we want to respect the Thomas Jefferson's idea of equality of opportunity through education in America, then many things has to change. But nothing needs to be invented and created from the scratch, because all of those things have been said and done and researched already in this country. So that's where the hope is, and at the same time, that's where the kind of a pessimism, in my mind, lies in this country. That is, whether America wants to become great again in education, as it has been a leader in the world, is about whether you want to do that. And this solution is between the ears of politicians and minds and brains of individual people. It's not about resources or technology or anything like this. And so the question is that will America do that? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, that is a very good question and very well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, Pasi. I wonder, among all of the things that we talked about as potential lessons for the U.S., if you were going to say, let's say the top three, just to summarize, what would be the three most important lessons that the U.S. could learn from the Finnish experience?
Well, I think that certainly the first one is to really understand more deeply what equity, what it means in practice, understand how important early childhood care and education are, how important funding schools in a fair way, how important special education and all these health and well-being services embedded in every school are. What do they mean by this equity? Because this is all about this equity agenda, and I think that the America could take much more closer look, not only what Finland has been doing in enhancing equity in education, but also the other successful education systems. So that's my number one thing, that take, stop for a moment and think about what equity means in education and how it could also enhance the quality and excellence of the entire system. Then the other one is that the other lesson particularly from Finland, is that this United States could do much better by doing much less of standardized testing and spending so much money and resources there. I'm often saying here in the United States that the thing that you should do is not to think about the next new thing to be introduced as a school reform for people, but try to identify the things that you should stop doing. And certainly there are many of those, but one of them is clearly the idea that there's too much attention and resources and time and frustration related to the over-reliance of standardized testing. And then thirdly, obviously, the huge importance of teachers as professionals. But here I would say that American people should not think like they have been kind of argued to think that the quality of education system cannot exceed the quality of teachers. I hear this often here. People are saying that that's why we need better individuals and better teachers in our system, because the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. I think this is a false belief. And again, Finland can show that even if you don't have the best teachers in the world, just like you can have a great basketball or football team here in America without having the best five-star players there. But if you have a good team and if you have a good understanding of the mission, you have great leadership, somebody who is leading with a vision, this school or school system, you can perform much better than you could given the quality of each and every individual teacher or educator in the system. So that's why I think Finland is showing how important the idea and ideology of team play, the team sport, is in teaching. The teachers are not individual marathon runners whose success will be decided who is cutting the finish line first or last, but teaching is a team sport where one teacher's success should depend on the other teachers and all the other teachers' performance rather than the other way around. And this is again the lesson that comes from places like Singapore and many other countries, that as soon as we begin to see teaching as a team sport, team play, then many of these things will change, and this would be definitely a good change and welcome change here in the United States.
Those are beautiful and wise words. As we wrap up, anything else that you want to address that we haven't covered today?
No, we have been covering a lot of ground, I think, and appreciate your questions. I don't know. You know, my grandfather was American citizen. He came here exactly 100 years ago. He left Finland in 1914 to look for, guess what? Good education. And he settled down in New York, New Jersey, and got his great education to be an engineer and shipbuilder here. And then when Finland became independent in 1917, in the 1920s, he came to Finland just to pay a visit to see his old father, and then met my grandmother and never went back, but remained as American citizen until the Second World War. And I remember when I was a little boy spending summers in his summer house in Finland, how he was so highly praising both the America as a country and nation, but particularly the U.S. education system, that how he learned all these things that he was able to do with his hands here in America. And somehow I've been carrying this with me ever since, and feel that somehow I feel kind of sad that the whole educational thinking in this country is kind of a derailed in a wrong. I think it's going in the wrong direction. And somehow I'm hoping that I would have my grandfather here with me to speak to these people how things should be done, and that's why I feel so closely and warmly about this country, and I hope that people, somebody will realize that the way that the country is walking now in education is a wrong way, and if you really care about people and all the values that this country care so much about, then there has to be another way.
Well, I think there are many, many educators and people all over the country who would agree with you, and you have really shared with us enormous insight, wisdom, and inspiration today. So our guest, again, has been Dr. Pasi Sahlberg. He is visiting professor at Harvard's Graduate School of Education, a former leader in the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture, and want to recommend his best-selling book, Finnish Lessons, What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland? Again, Dr. Sahlberg, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and wisdom.
Thank you for having me there.
All righty.